Dub Nation, something is unraveling at Chase Center right now that goes far beyond basketball strategy, far beyond rotations and game plans. And if you've been paying close attention to the body language, the public statements, and the timeline of events surrounding one of our most talented young players, you know that we're witnessing a situation that could fundamentally alter the trajectory of this franchise for years to come. Welcome back to Warriors News Fan Report, your premier destination for breaking news, exclusive insider analysis, and comprehensive coverage of our beloved Golden State Warriors. I'm bringing you an update today that connects medical evaluations with organizational dynamics, player psychology with championship aspiration, and individual ambition with team chemistry. And I need you to stay with me through every detail, because what's happening right now with one of our core young pieces represents a crossroads moment that will define how this season unfolds and potentially reshape our entire roster construction moving forward. Let me take you back to the beginning of this season, because context is absolutely crucial for understanding how we arrived at this moment. The Warriors entered this campaign with legitimate championship aspiration, with a roster that blended championship experience and hungry young talent, with Steve Kerr's proven system, and with the hope that our core veterans could mentor the next generation while still competing at the highest level. Jonathan Kuminga was supposed to be a central figure in that vision, a 23-year-old with elite athleticism, defensive versatility, and offensive upside that suggested he could become a cornerstone piece for this franchise. He re-signed with the Warriors near the start of the season, which many interpreted as a commitment to the organization and a signal that both sides wanted to build something together. But almost immediately, tensions began to surface in ways that were impossible to ignore for anyone watching closely. Kuminga started the season in the starting lineup, which seemed like the natural progression for a player of his talent and potential. But as the team struggled to find consistency, as wins became harder to come by, and as the Warriors found themselves battling just to stay above .500, something shifted in how the coaching staff viewed Kuminga's role. He was dropped from the starting lineup, a decision that sent shockwaves through the fanbase and raised immediate questions about what was happening behind the scenes. Was this a performance-based decision? Was this about fit within certain lineups? Or was there something deeper going on that we weren't seeing? What happened next is where this story takes a turn that every Warriors fan needs to understand. As the team continued to struggle, Kuminga began to feel publicly scapegoated for the team's issues. Now, I want to be careful here, because we're talking about perceptions and feelings, things that are harder to quantify than shooting percentages or defensive ratings. But when a young player who's been a significant part of your rotation suddenly finds himself on the outside looking in, when he sees his minutes fluctuate wildly, when he hears criticism in media sessions that seems disproportionate to his actual performance, those feelings become real factors in the relationship between player and organization. And in the modern NBA, where player empowerment is at an all-time high, where young stars have options and leverage, those feelings can't be dismissed or ignored. Steve Kerr's public comments about Kuminga became a flashpoint in this developing situation. When a player is dealing with an injury or working through recovery, you expect your head coach to show support, to express confidence in the player's commitment to getting healthy, to maintain that connection that's so crucial for team chemistry. But Kerr's comments about Kuminga's recovery showed what many interpreted as disinterest, a lack of enthusiasm about the player's timeline, and perhaps even skepticism about the injury itself. For a young player who's already feeling marginalized, who's already questioning his role within the organization, those kinds of public statements can be devastating to the relationship. And for many observers, those comments felt like the writing was on the wall for the 7th overall pick from the 2021 NBA Draft. Now we arrive at the present moment, at the development that has Dub Nation buzzing and has NBA analysts across the league speculating about what comes next. Anthony Slater of ESPN recently reported on Kuminga's injury status, and the details are absolutely fascinating when you consider everything that's been building throughout the season. Kuminga underwent an MRI on his knee, and here's the crucial detail. The MRI came back clean. There's no structural damage, no torn ligaments, no cartilage issues, nothing that would typically keep a player sidelined for an extended period. In most cases, when an MRI comes back clean, that's great news. That's the green light for a player to resume basketball activities, to start ramping up their conditioning, and to work their way back into game shape. But that's not what's happening with Jonathan Kuminga. And this is where the situation becomes incredibly complex and layered with implications that go far beyond a simple injury update. Despite the clean MRI, despite the medical evaluation showing no structural damage, Kuminga has complained about knee pain and stayed away from training. He's told the organization that his knee has been sore for 2 weeks, that he's not comfortable pushing through the discomfort, and that he needs more time before he can return to basketball activities. The Warriors were hoping that after the MRI came back clean, Kuminga would start scrimmaging with the team, that he'd begin the process of working his way back into the rotation. But instead, he's remained away from the court. Now, I want to be absolutely clear about something before we go any further. Knee pain is real, discomfort is real, and no player should be pressured to play through pain that could lead to more serious injury. The last thing any of us want is for Kuminga to rush back, to aggravate something that could have been prevented with proper rest, and to end up with a long-term injury that derails his career. Player health has to be the priority, always. But the timing of this situation, the context surrounding it, and the way it's unfolding have led to widespread speculation across NBA media and among fans about what's really happening. Social media exploded with reactions to this news, and the consensus opinion among a significant portion of NBA fans is that Kuminga might be angling for a way out of Golden State. One fan simply wrote that Kuminga saw Moses Moody cooking in recent games and immediately grabbed his knee, suggesting that seeing another young player succeed in his absence made him less eager to return. Another fan added that Kuminga doesn't want to be a scapegoat for the team's losses anymore, and that they respect him for protecting himself. A third fan claimed that Kuminga is preserving himself for free agency, positioning himself for a fresh start with a new organization. Another fan joked that the knee will miraculously be better on January 15th, which happens to be the exact date that Kuminga becomes eligible to be traded under NBA rules. And yet another fan pointed out a previous pattern in the league, noting that this feels like the Kawhi Leonard special, a reference to how Leonard's situation unfolded in San Antonio before he was eventually traded to Toronto. Now, I'm not here to tell you that Jonathan Kuminga is definitely faking an injury or that he's deliberately staying away from the team to force a trade. I don't have access to his medical record. I'm not in his head, and I'm not going to make accusations that I can't substantiate. But what I can tell you is that the optics of this situation are incredibly problematic for both sides, and that the relationship between Kuminga and the Warriors organization appears to be fractured in ways that might be irreparable at this point. When your MRI comes back clean, but you're still not ready to return to basketball activities, when the timeline keeps extending without clear medical justification, and when all of this is happening against the backdrop of public tension and rotation disputes, people are going to draw conclusions about what's really going on. Lou Williams, the former NBA Sixth Man of the Year, who's now a media personality, weighed in on this situation with some comments that I think are really worth examining. Williams gave Kuminga props and suggested that he's better off outside of the Warriors, that he should be trying to become a star somewhere else rather than fighting for his role in Golden State. Williams made the point that even if there are personal feelings involved, even if Steve Kerr doesn't particularly like Kuminga as a player, if Kuminga could help the Warriors win basketball games, he will be playing. The implication there is that Kuminga's absence from the rotation isn't just about personal dynamics. It's about the coaching staff's evaluation that he's not helping the team win right now. But Williams went further, and this is where his analysis gets really interesting. He said that Kuminga got his money with the contract extension, and now he should take that money somewhere else and be a star. Williams believes Kuminga is a star-level talent, but that he's being held back in the Warriors system, that he probably wants to flourish and spread his wings rather than being second fiddle to anyone at this point in his career. That's a fascinating perspective because it frames this situation not as Kuminga failing to meet the Warriors' standards, but as the Warriors failing to provide the environment where Kuminga can reach his full potential. Michelle Beadle pushed back on Williams' comments by suggesting that if Kuminga goes elsewhere to be a star, it's probably going to be on a lousy team. But Chandler Parsons made an excellent counterpoint that I think cuts right to the heart of this debate. The Warriors are one game above .500 right now. They're an average team themselves at this point in the season. So the idea that Kuminga should stay with Golden State because they're a better situation than wherever he might land does really hold up when you look at the actual standings and the actual performance of this team. Let's talk about what this means for the Warriors moving forward, because this is where we need to shift from analyzing what's happened to projecting what comes next. Kuminga becomes eligible to be traded on January 15th, which is just 3 weeks away from right now. That gives the Warriors and Kuminga's representation a very limited window to either repair this relationship or to find a suitable trade partner that works for both sides. The NBA trade deadline comes shortly after that eligibility date, which means decisions are going to have to be made quickly. From the Warriors' perspective, they have to weigh several competing factors. On one hand, Kuminga is a 23-year-old with tremendous physical tools, defensive versatility, and offensive potential that could make him a valuable piece for years to come. He's on a contract that provides cost certainty, and in theory, he should be entering his prime years as a player. Trading him means giving up on that potential, admitting that the relationship didn't work, and potentially watching him flourish elsewhere in a way that makes this organization look foolish for giving up on him. On the other hand, if the relationship is truly broken, if Kuminga doesn't want to be here and the coaching staff doesn't trust him, then keeping him becomes counterproductive. You can't force chemistry, you can't mandate trust, and you can't build a winning culture when there's fundamental disconnect between a player and the organization. If Kuminga is genuinely angling for a way out, if his injury situation is more about leverage than legitimate medical concern, then the Warriors need to maximize his trade value while they still can rather than letting the situation deteriorate further. The challenge for Mike Dunleavy Jr. and the Warriors front office is determining what Kuminga's actual trade value is in the current market. He's a talented young player with upside, which should generate interest from teams looking to add a potential building block. But he's also a player who's been inconsistent, who's had public friction with his current organization, and who's dealing with an injury situation that's murky at best. Teams evaluating a potential Kuminga trade are going to have questions about his attitude, his commitment, his health, and his ability to be a positive contributor to a winning environment. Those questions will affect the return package that Golden State can command. There's also the question of what the Warriors will be looking for in a Kuminga trade. Are they trying to get win-now pieces that can help Steph Curry in what might be the final years of his prime? Are they looking for future draft assets that can help them rebuild once the current core ages out? Are they trying to find another young player with similar upside, but a better fit within their system? The answer to that question will determine which teams make sense as trade partners and what kind of deals might be realistic. I want to address something directly to Dub Nation right now, because I know this situation is frustrating and confusing for a lot of fans. We've invested emotionally in Jonathan Kuminga's development. We've watched him grow from a raw prospect into a player with real NBA skills, and we've hoped that he would be part of the next chapter of Warriors basketball. Seeing this relationship fall apart, seeing the tension and the dysfunction, it's disappointing. But we have to trust that the organization is going to make the decision that's best for the long-term health of this franchise, even if that decision is painful in the short term. If the Warriors determine that trading Kuminga is the right move, then we have to believe they'll get fair value in return and that they have a plan for how to use those assets to keep this team competitive. And if they determine that this relationship can be salvaged, that Kuminga can still be a valuable part of what they're building, then we have to support the effort to make that work. What we can't do is let this situation create division within the fan base or distract from the bigger picture of trying to maximize Steph Curry's remaining prime years. The optimistic view of this situation, and I'm always going to try to find the optimistic view because that's who I am as a Warriors fan, is that maybe this is the wake-up call that both sides need. Maybe Kuminga realizes that the grass isn't always greener, that being the man on a bad team isn't as appealing as contributing to winning basketball in Golden State. Maybe the Warriors realize that they need to do a better job of communicating with their young players, of making them feel valued, and of creating an environment where talent can flourish. Maybe cooler heads prevail, conversations happen, and this situation gets resolved in a way that works for everyone. But the realistic view, based on everything we're seeing and everything that's been reported, is that this relationship has probably run its course. When you have a player whose MRI comes back clean, but who's still staying away from the team, when you have a coach showing public disinterest in that player's recovery, when you have former players suggesting that the player would be better off elsewhere, those are signs that point in one direction, and that direction is probably toward a trade before the deadline. Here's my complete analysis of where we stand. Jonathan Kuminga's situation with the Warriors has deteriorated to a point where a trade seems increasingly likely. The injury situation, regardless of the underlying medical reality, has become a proxy for deeper issues about role, trust, and organizational fit. The Warriors have 3 weeks to figure out their next move, and whatever they decide will have significant implications for this season and beyond. I hope this gets resolved in a way that's best for both Kuminga's career and the Warriors' championship aspiration. But I'm preparing myself for the reality that we might be saying goodbye to a player we all hoped would be part of our future. Now I want to hear from you, Dub Nation. Do you think Jonathan Kuminga should be traded? Or do you believe this relationship can still be salvaged? What kind of return would you want to see if the Warriors do move him? And do you think the organization handled this situation correctly? Or could they have done more to make Kuminga feel valued? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is one of the most important conversations we'll have all season. And I genuinely want to know how you're processing this situation. If you want to stay on top of every Warriors development, every trade possibility, every update on Kuminga and the rest of our roster as we navigate toward the deadline, make sure you're subscribed to Warriors News Fan Report. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a breaking news update. Smash that like button to support the channel and share this with every Warriors fan you know. We're in this together, and we're going to get through this situation together as we continue chasing championships. Strength in numbers. Let's go. Warriors!